Hey guys, so I'm here with a buddy of mine, Mark. Mark is a respected journalist.
Respected
Journalist and friend, buddy.
Okay.
I invited Mark over to my house to chat about his report that he's put up, Toronto in 2030. So he did a expose.
Not necessarily a feature story with a number of high-profile experts, officials, and the like here in Toronto.
And there's some predictions that they've made. There's some trends you've noticed as well. I encourage you all to watch it. If you have not watched it, there'll be a link in this caption as well. I think you did a great job. And it really got me thinking. So I'm a realtor, and housing matters to me, affordability matters to me, and I looked at it with that lens as well. So I want to just go over a few points that you brought up in that video. You led with a section where you said Toronto is going to be more dense, it's going to be more people. What do you mean? Like, what's happening?
Well, basically, we're going to have more people coming to Toronto. Obviously, it's the center of the universe, or Canada at least, for many people. And as a result of that, we're going to see another boom in our population. They say by 2030, there's going to be 8 million people in the GTA alone. And it's going to be spread out. However, we're going to see more density. We're seeing the condo towers go up
everywhere.
And it's going to continue to go along that route, whether it be downtown or along transit corridors. But more density is certainly going to happen as a result of these extra people.
So more and more into Toronto. So I was reading The Star. I'm going to pull up some stats here. So there was an article last weekend, actually. I don't know if you read this article about immigration patterns.
Of course I read the comparatives all the time.
Canada welcomed the most immigrants in a century last year. So the numbers are 341,000 people made Canada their home from overseas last year. 341,000, okay, 2019. Of those, 153,000 ended up in Ontario.
And a good chunk.
In total, 117,000 people ended up in Toronto.
It's unreal.
Which is greater than the population of Kingston, Ontario.
That's huge.
Absorbed in 1 year.
Well, what I find interesting about that is we've got new Canadians coming in, some with money, some without. And you might touch upon this, but this is why the whole discussion is taking place around affordable housing at the same time, right? We've got people that can afford, but we've got a lot of people that can't necessarily. I'm sure you've got solutions in and around that, but this whole action plan that the city set forth about creating more affordable housing in the city too, and that's mainly geared towards people like that, people that don't think that they can afford to get into the market.
Okay. Tech is where we're seeing a lot of the new jobs. Dude, when you mentioned...
You're not going to be able to do your own job.
You know what? I could be outsourced as well. I could be built off into some automated AI world.
Yes.
But there's something that you said near the end of the segment that really resonated with me. You said, but there's an explosion of careers that have yet to be created. Like there's going to be a whole bunch of... There's going to be a new industries. There's going to be new... career paths that we don't even know about yet in the next decade.
Kids, those are the jobs that our children are going to end up, and that's why we need to prepare them. That's why you see young kids taking coding classes, driven by the tech sector. Again, these are things that we can't foresee, or at least those in the industry think they know, and as a result of that, we've got to be the place. If we want Toronto to be what we want it to be, we have to be able to create the environment in order for those jobs to take off.
It's going to be remarkable. You talked about the last 10 years or the lead up, the last decade, when 2020, when the clock turned.
Yeah.
And then, just thinking back where we were 10 years ago and what, just what life was like, right? And now what we imagine it'll be like in 10 years from now.
There's a great story that people use, or at least something to give us a sense of the change that's happening and how quickly it's happening. When you think about the introduction of the iPhone in 2007, I believe. In 2017, 10 years later, how many iPhones exist?
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Billions.
Yeah.
Or a billion.
An entire ecosystem, app stores.
Everything is based on our mobile devices, and that only took 10 years to happen. We wouldn't have otherwise...
Could you imagine?
We wouldn't have seen it. So while we saw it on the wall, sci-fi...
no kidding.
Star Trek had their flip phones, right? But to know that it was only the people that had that foresight in that industry that was able to say, here's how we're going to do it, here's how we want it to happen, and it happened.
No, that's remarkable. Somebody you interviewed in that video said, he quoted Bill Gates. So I'm quoting this guy who quoted Bill Gates. So it's kind of like what I do with my Michael Scott isms from The Office. Okay. Yeah. So he came out and said, Bill Gates said, people tend to overestimate what can be done in 2 years and underestimate what can be done in 10. So
look at us quoting Steve Jobs and Bill Gates.
Look at that.
They know
not just a pretty face. I know you think that this is Brad Pitt and Leo here, but we're actually educated intellects. So that's awesome. So in my world, I know that you are very much in tune. We're neighbors. We know what the market. We know what happens in the real estate world in which I operate.
Well, I look to you to find out what's going on.
Yeah, so everything that I have seen has been a sharp hockey stick lead up in prices again in Toronto, and it's always going to be a supply and demand issue.
Let me ask you this.
Sure.
As a journalist, I ask the questions for the most part. When we look at that trend and we hear about people saying, I can't do this, I can't get into this market, I cannot find a way to do it, I have to go elsewhere.
Right.
What do you tell them?
Same thing I tell my kids. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. I don't believe that can't is an answer. I feel like where there's a will, there's a way. And you may need to take the long path, but there's absolutely a path to getting you what you want if you're committed to it. So I disagree in the can't thing personally, because I'd never say can't. But I feel like, it's the old expression. Whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you are right. And so
beyond real estate, you're a motivational speaker.
I'm a motivational speaker
At the same time.
Yes. Love you, Mom.
Just do it.
We're in a unique position. I can't think of another time where Toronto's been at the forefront globally, where the immigration levels that we're experiencing here are these are real numbers here. The diversity of the city, of the economies. We're not big in one thing, Mark. We're not big in oil and gas. We're big in everything, right? This is across the board. And generally in a world where things are kind of chaotic at the moment, there's reasons enough to come to Canada. Healthcare, stability, democracy, like all these things, and they just lead into the fact that people will continue to make Toronto a home. So your numbers on population growth, I can absolutely see that as being true.
Yeah, and there's a reason why in the city's planning we're seeing zoning changes. So
okay, good.
In the downtown core, we want to see that density. The idea that we live in a detached home or a semi-detached home, that might start, swaying. Older people selling off their homes, turning into multi-units. Obviously, there's smaller spaces throughout. Laneway housing, all of that stuff.
The way that they're making secondary suites more realistic, achievable goals for people. The city's done the part. I would say that. I don't think it's perfect, but I feel like they're loosening the reins a little bit to allow for housing in new categories. Dude, thanks so much. Watch Mark's video because you'll be wowed by some of the visuals you put out there. The landscape, the way the city's changing with all those green towers coming up.
It's amazing to see all the towers that are going to be popping up.
It's like boom, boom everywhere. So it looks amazing. And let's watch this video 10 years from now and see how accurate we were.
Good point.
On those predictions and stuff.
Yeah.
We'll set a reminder. We'll tell Siri to tell us how to do that.
Alexa,
in 10 years from now. Thanks so much for watching.